Today, let's start with something that might feel uncomfortable to hear. You've downloaded an educational app for your child. It teaches letters, numbers, reading, or math. The colors are bright, the characters are friendly, the progress reports look impressive, and your child seems completely engaged. They tap quickly, they move fast, they want to keep going, and you think, this is great, they're learning. But then something strange happens later. When the screen turns off, they struggle to sit with a book. They lose interest in toys quickly. Homework feels harder. They get restless, distracted, or frustrated faster than before. And you wonder, if this app is educational, why does my child's focus seem worse? Here's the truth most parents don't realize. Many educational apps are not designed to build attention. They are designed to capture it. And capturing attention is very different from strengthening it. Today, we're going to talk about 5 types of educational apps that may actually be shrinking your child's attention span, lowering frustration tolerance, and training their brain to expect constant stimulation instead of deep focus. Because attention is not just about what your child is learning. It's about how their brain is learning to stay engaged. Let's start with the first type, reward-heavy learning apps. These are the apps filled with stars, coins, sounds, animations, and instant celebrations after every correct answer. The child taps the right choice, and immediately there is applause, flashing colors, and a reward. This feels motivating, but here's what's happening neurologically. Each reward triggers a dopamine release, the brain chemical associated with pleasure and motivation. Over time, the brain begins to associate learning not with effort or curiosity, but with external reward. And this changes the learning pattern. Instead of thinking, I want to solve this, the brain learns, I want the reward. The problem shows up later. Real-world learning doesn't give instant points, sounds, or visual celebrations. Reading a book, solving a problem, or listening in class feels slower and less stimulating. And the brain, now trained for fast dopamine feedback, experiences normal learning as boring. The second type of app that quietly affects attention is rapid micro-lesson platforms. These apps break learning into tiny tasks that last only a few seconds. Tap the answer, swipe, next question, quick success, move on. Again, this feels efficient. But attention is like a muscle. And when the brain is constantly trained to shift every few seconds, it never practices staying with something long enough to build endurance. Over time, the child's attention system becomes adapted to short bursts instead of sustained focus. This is why many children who use these apps extensively struggle to sit with longer tasks, even when the content is appropriate for their age. The brain has learned speed. It hasn't learned persistence. Now, let's talk about the third category, gamified learning platforms. These apps turn learning into a game with levels, characters, streaks, and competition. Children aren't just solving problems, they're chasing progress, unlocking features, and maintaining streaks. The intention is motivation. But the brain interprets this differently. Instead of focusing on the learning itself, the child's attention shifts toward the game structure. The excitement comes from advancement, not from understanding. And because these platforms are designed to maintain high stimulation through movement, sound, and constant novelty, the nervous system stays in a state of high arousal. After the screen turns off, the real world feels slow and quiet by comparison, and the child's brain reacts with restlessness.
If this is already making you think differently about educational screen time, take a moment to like this video
and share in the comments how your child behaves after using learning apps. And don't forget to subscribe to the Parenting Blueprint. We also offer a 2-level membership where you'll find exclusive content and early access to tools that help you protect your child's focus, emotional regulation, and long-term learning skills. Now let's move into the part of the conversation that most parents never see. Because the most powerful forces shaping your child's attention are not always the bright colors, the rewards, or the games themselves, but the invisible systems working behind the screen. that quietly adjust the experience in ways that feel helpful, personalized, and supportive, while actually training the brain to expect constant ease, constant stimulation, and very low tolerance for effort or frustration. The fourth type of educational app that can weaken attention over time is the adaptive algorithm platform. These apps are designed to adjust automatically to your child's performance. If a task feels too hard, the app quickly simplifies it. If your child makes several mistakes, the level drops. If attention slows down, the difficulty changes to keep engagement high and frustration low. From a parent's perspective, this looks like personalization and support. The child stays engaged, they don't get stuck, they don't get discouraged. But from a neurological perspective, something very important is missing. The brain grows its attention strength and problem-solving ability during moments of productive struggle, when something feels challenging but manageable, when the child has to pause, think, try again, and stay with the discomfort long enough to figure it out. This process builds what psychologists call frustration tolerance, which is one of the strongest predictors of long-term academic success, emotional regulation, and persistence. When an algorithm constantly removes difficulty the moment frustration appears, the brain never practices staying with challenge. Instead, it learns a very different expectation. If something feels hard, the system should adjust. If effort increases, difficulty should decrease. If frustration appears, relief should come immediately. And this is exactly the opposite of how real learning works in school, in reading, in writing, in problem solving, and eventually in life. The result is a child who performs well inside the app environment, but becomes discouraged quickly when faced with real-world tasks that do not adjust to their comfort level. Now, let's talk about the fifth category, which may be the most powerful of all: endless educational platforms. These are the apps or learning environments where content never truly ends. After one activity comes another, then another, with no natural stopping point. New lessons appear automatically. New challenges unlock continuously. There is always one more level, one more activity, one more reward waiting. From the outside, this looks like motivation and engagement. But what the brain experiences is something very different. It experiences continuous stimulation without closure. Healthy attention development depends on clear cycles of effort, completion, and rest. The brain needs to experience finishing something, pausing, and shifting away in order to build self-regulation. Endless platforms remove that natural boundary. Instead of learning to stop, the child's brain learns to keep going as long as stimulation continues. And because these systems are designed to maintain engagement through novelty and variety, the brain becomes conditioned to expect constant input. This pattern doesn't stay inside the app. After repeated exposure, children often struggle with transitions away from screens, resist stopping even when asked, and show increased irritability or restlessness when the stimulation ends. This is not simply a behavior issue. It is a nervous system that has been trained to operate at a higher level of stimulation than everyday activities provide. And this leads to one of the most important points in this entire conversation. Attention is not only about what children are learning. Attention is about what level of stimulation their brain becomes accustomed to. When learning is always fast, colorful, interactive, and reward-driven, slower forms of learning, such as reading, listening, writing, or even independent play, begin to feel understimulating. The brain is not being lazy, the brain has been recalibrated. And when parents say, "My child can focus for hours on a screen but not 5 minutes on homework," what they are often seeing is not a lack of attention ability, but a mismatch between high stimulation conditioning and low stimulation tasks. Now, this does not mean all educational apps are harmful, and it does not mean screens must be eliminated entirely. What it means is that the design of the learning experience matters more than the label, because many tools that are marketed as educational are actually optimized for engagement, not for cognitive endurance. and cognitive endurance is the real foundation of learning. Now let's talk about the question every parent is really asking. Because once you understand how many educational apps are shaping attention in ways that don't actually support deep focus, the natural next concern becomes very practical and very real. What should you actually do differently at home without feeling like you have to remove technology completely or turn everyday life into a constant battle over screens? Because the goal is not to eliminate technology from your child's life, and it is not to create guilt around every digital tool.
Since screens are part of the modern world and will continue to be part of your child's education, social life, and future work environment, the real goal is to protect and strengthen your child's attention system, because attention is not simply a school skill that affects grades or homework performance. Attention is the foundation for reading comprehension, problem solving, emotional regulation, creativity, patience, and the ability to stay with something long enough to experience mastery, instead of quitting when things become slow, difficult, or uncomfortable. And the encouraging news is this: attention is highly trainable, but it develops under very specific conditions that look very different from the design of most high-stimulation learning platforms. The first principle is to choose digital tools that require thinking effort instead of constant interaction and reward. Healthy learning experiences move at a pace that allows the brain to process information, pause, and work through small challenges instead of providing instant feedback, animation, or sound after every response. If an app feels fast, flashy, and constantly stimulating, then it is most likely training engagement rather than building true attention endurance. Real focus grows when the brain has to stay with something quietly, without entertainment carrying the experience. The second principle is to choose learning tools that have clear stopping points instead of endless progression. When a platform automatically loads the next lesson, the next level, or the next activity without interruption, the brain never practices the important cycle of effort, completion, and rest. Instead, look for digital experiences where one lesson ends, the screen turns off, and the child naturally transitions back into the real world. That simple boundary teaches the nervous system how to stop voluntarily, which is a critical part of self-regulation. The third principle, and one of the most powerful for rebuilding attention capacity, is to intentionally protect time for low-stimulation activities every day. Attention endurance grows strongest during experiences that feel slower and quieter than screens. Reading physical books without animation or sound, drawing, building, or creating something with their hands, working on puzzles that take time and patience, listening to stories, engaging in independent play without constant entertainment. At first, children who are used to high-stimulation digital environments may resist these activities and say they are bored or lose interest quickly. But this resistance is actually a normal part of the brain adjusting back to a lower stimulation level. And this is important to understand. Boredom is not a problem. Boredom is the beginning of attention training. When the brain is no longer flooded with constant input, it begins to generate its own focus, imagination, and curiosity. And this is the moment when attention strength starts to rebuild. The fourth principle is to pay close attention to transitions after screen time, because what happens immediately after a device is turned off gives you important information about your child's nervous system state. If your child becomes irritable, restless, emotionally reactive, or unable to settle into another task, their system was likely operating at a high stimulation level. Instead of moving directly from screen time into homework, reading, or another task that requires concentration, it helps to create a short transition buffer. This might include quiet physical movement, stretching, walking, or simply a few minutes of calm, low-demand activity that allows the nervous system to settle before expecting sustained focus again. The fifth and final principle, which often has the strongest long-term impact, is modeling your own attention habits in daily life. Children are constantly observing how adults interact with devices, how often attention is divided, and whether screens interrupt conversations, meals, or focused activities. When they see constant checking, scrolling, multitasking, and distraction, their brain learns that this level of attention fragmentation is normal. But when they see you read without your phone nearby, finish tasks without interruption, or give them your full attention during conversations, they are learning what sustained focus actually looks like. Attention is not only something children are taught, it is something they absorb from the environment around them. Now, when we step back and look at the bigger picture, the concern is not simply that educational apps exist or that children enjoy them. The concern is that many digital tools are designed to maximize stimulation, speed, novelty, and reward, while real learning and real attention development require something very different. They require slowness. They require effort. They require moments of frustration. They require persistence. And they require the experience of finishing something without constant entertainment. And this leads to the most important takeaway from this entire conversation. If your child struggles to focus after using educational apps, it is not because they lack discipline, motivation, or ability. It is because their attention system has been trained for a level of stimulation that everyday learning cannot match. The solution is not punishment, restriction alone, or constant conflict. The solution is balance. More slow activities, more real-world learning, more quiet focus, more opportunities for the brain to work without external stimulation carrying the experience. Before we finish, if this video helped you see educational screen time from a new perspective, take a moment to like this video and share in the comments which apps or digital habits you are now reconsidering in your home. And if you want more science-based strategies to protect your child's focus, emotional regulation, and long-term learning ability, subscribe to the Parenting Blueprint. Because the ability to sit with a book, stay with a problem, tolerate boredom, and focus without constant stimulation is not just a school skill. It is a life skill. And protecting your child's attention today may be one of the most valuable gifts you give their future.